There's a country club in a suburb outside Charlotte, North Carolina, stone columns at the entrance, a parking lot full of vehicles that cost more than most people's first house, a dining room with cloth napkins, and a wait list on Friday nights. Every Thursday morning, a man named Douglas pulls into that parking lot in a dark blue SUV, $62,000, leather seats, panoramic sunroof. He parks in the same spot every week. Walks through the lobby in pressed slacks and a golf shirt that still has the tag's crease. Tips the valet even though he parked himself. Douglas is 76 years old. He retired 8 years ago with $1.1 million. And from the outside, everything about his life says he's doing exactly what a successful retiree should be doing. The car, the club, the trips with the grandkids, the kitchen his wife finally got to remodel, the dinners where he always picks up the check. His neighbors admire him. His kids thank him. His golf buddies call him the guy who did it right. But last Tuesday, Douglas sat at his kitchen table and opened his brokerage account for the first time in 4 months. And the number on the screen made his hands stop moving. $480,000. 8 years ago, it was $1.1 million. He stared at it for a long time. Then he closed the laptop. Then he sat there in the kitchen his wife always wanted, in the house that looks exactly like success is supposed to look, and he tried to figure out where it all went. It wasn't the market. The market did fine. It wasn't a scam. Nobody took anything from him. It was something much harder to see, and by the time he saw it, more than half of his life savings had already disappeared. This video is going to show you what happened to Douglas. And more importantly, it's going to show you why thousands of retirees across this country are watching the same thing happen to them right now without realizing it. Because the most dangerous thing about this problem is that it doesn't look like a problem. It looks like the retirement you've been dreaming about your whole life. There are two ways to think about your money in retirement. The first is what I call visible wealth. This is the model where your money exists to be seen. The new car in the driveway, the kitchen renovation, the trip to Europe with the kids' business class, 5-star hotel, the whole production. Every dollar is a statement. Every purchase is a signal. I made it. I'm doing well. I earned this. The second model is what I call durable wealth. This is the model where your money exists to work, not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, just to keep running quietly, consistently, for as long as you need it. Now, let me be clear. This isn't about right versus wrong. It's not about being cheap versus being generous. It's about two strategies that produce two mathematically different outcomes over 15, 20, 25 years of retirement. Let me show you what I mean. Let's go back 8 years to the week Douglas retired. He was 68, $1.1 million in his portfolio, no debt, pension, and Social Security covering about 40% of his basic expenses. By any measure, he'd done well. He worked his way up from a junior technician to a regional operations manager. He maxed out his 401k for the last 18 years. He did everything the financial world told him to do. His first year of retirement looked like this. The SUV, $62,000. A full kitchen and bathroom remodel, $45,000. A 2-week trip to Italy with his wife and adult children, $28,000. The country club membership, $14,000 a year. He also started picking up the check at family dinners every time, without exception, because that's what the successful patriarch does. Now meet Margaret. She's 67. She retired the same year as Douglas with $1.05 million, slightly less than him. Same general profile. Pension and Social Security covering about the same share of her basics. She spent 34 years as an administrative director at a mid-sized company. Nothing flashy. She saved steadily, invested simply, and never once talked about money at dinner parties. Her first year of retirement looked like this. She kept her car. She kept her kitchen. She took a trip to the coast with her sister 4 nights, a rental cottage, good food, long walks. Total cost about $3,000. She also started volunteering at the local library 2 mornings a week, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. 7 years from now, one of them will have more money than the day they retired. The other will be counting every dollar. Same generation, similar savings, almost identical starting positions, but their money is about to follow 2 completely different trajectories. And the reason has nothing to do with the market, nothing to do with interest rates, and nothing to do with luck. It has everything to do with who they're spending for. Let's stay with Douglas for a moment, because his story is important and it's more common than most people think. Douglas didn't do anything reckless. He didn't buy a yacht. He didn't start a business. He didn't hand out money to strangers. Everything he did made perfect emotional sense. He worked for 41 years. He saved, he sacrificed, he watched other people enjoy things while he was grinding through 12-hour shifts and early morning commutes. And now, finally, it was his turn. So when the dealership had that SUV with the leather seats and the panoramic roof, he didn't think twice. He'd earned it. When his wife suggested the kitchen remodel, the one they'd been putting off for 15 years, he said yes. Of course he said yes. They deserved it. And when his kids said, "Dad, let's do Italy together," he wasn't going to say no. What kind of father says no to that? Here's the thing about Douglas. He's not financially illiterate. He knows what a budget is. He understands compounding. He's read the articles. He could probably explain the 4% rule better than most people half his age. But none of that mattered because every spending decision felt emotionally justified. And when something feels justified, the math becomes invisible. There's a psychological concept called moral licensing. It means that when we feel we've earned something, when we've been disciplined for a long time, we give ourselves permission to relax. And we don't just relax a little, we overcorrect. 40 years of discipline doesn't produce moderate reward, it produces explosive reward. It's the financial equivalent of a crash diet ending at a buffet. Douglas wasn't being greedy, he was being human. And that's what makes this so dangerous, because the behavior looks perfectly reasonable from the inside. That first year, Douglas withdrew $149,000 from his portfolio on a $1.1 million balance. That's a withdrawal rate of over 13%. The safe withdrawal rate, the one most financial planners recommend, is 4%. Douglas blew past it by a factor of 3 in year 1. But here's where it gets worse. Year 2, he didn't spend $149,000, he spent $86,000. That sounds like a correction, right? Like he pulled back? He didn't. What happened is that the big purchases were done, but the lifestyle they created wasn't. The SUV needed premium insurance, the remodeled kitchen needed new appliances to match, the country club came with monthly dining minimums, golf fees, and social expectations. Douglas had entered what I call the status maintenance trap. Every big purchase creates a constellation of smaller purchases that exist only to support it. The car needs a garage upgrade. The club membership needs the right wardrobe. The international trip becomes the baseline for all future vacations because you can't go from business class to economy. You can't go from Tuscany to a state park. Not without feeling like you're going backward. Think about it this way. Douglas didn't just buy an SUV. He bought a $62,000 vehicle that now costs $240 a month to insure, $90 a month in premium fuel, and $1,200 every time it needs service at the dealership. The SUV doesn't exist in isolation. It exists inside a system of ongoing costs that nobody budgets for on the day of purchase. The same thing happened with the kitchen. The remodel was $45,000. But then the old dining table looked out of place. Then the living room furniture didn't match the new aesthetic. Then the lighting needed updating. The renovation that was supposed to cost $45,000 eventually cost closer to $70,000. And the country club? $14,000 a year sounds manageable, but there's the golf cart lease, the dining minimum you have to hit every month whether you're hungry or not, the charity gala where you're expected to buy a table, the locker room where every other member is talking about their trip to Cabo or their grandkids' private school. You don't just pay for a membership, you pay for admission to a lifestyle that requires constant spending to remain a member in good standing, not with the club, but with the people in it. And retirees hate feeling like they're going backward, because backward feels like failure. And failure, after 40 years of work, is unthinkable. So Douglas kept spending, not extravagantly, not wildly, just consistently above the line. By year 5, his portfolio was down to $710,000. The market had actually done fine, averaging about 7% annual returns, but his withdrawals were eating the gains and then some. The erosion wasn't sudden. There was no single catastrophic event. It was a pattern, invisible, incremental, and entirely self-inflicted. And the worst part? Everyone around him was doing the same thing. His country club friends, his neighbors, his brother-in-law with the boat, the entire social ecosystem reinforced the behavior. Spending was normal, restraint was suspicious. If you weren't upgrading, people asked if everything was okay. Douglas wasn't spending for himself. He was spending for an audience, and that audience never had to pay the bill. Now let's look at Margaret. Margaret isn't cheap. I want to be very clear about that. She's not the person clipping coupons and eating rice and beans. She goes out to dinner, she buys nice things, she travels, but Margaret operates on a completely different principle. Before every significant purchase, she asks herself one question. Am I doing this for me, or am I doing this so someone else can see me doing it? That single question changed everything. When she retired, her friends expected her to upgrade her car. She didn't. Not because she couldn't afford it, but because her car worked fine and a new one wouldn't make her mornings any better. It would just make her driveway more impressive. When her neighbor remodeled his kitchen, she thought about it for about a week. Then she realized she loved cooking in her kitchen. It wasn't outdated, it was familiar. The only reason to change it would be to show it off at dinner parties. And Margaret didn't throw dinner parties for applause, she threw them for conversation. Her first year withdrawal, $38,000 on a $1.05 million portfolio. That's a withdrawal rate of 3.6%, comfortably below the 4% guideline. Year 2, $40,000. Year 3, $41,000. No dramatic increases, no lifestyle inflation, no status maintenance trap because there was no status to maintain. By year 7, something remarkable happened. Margaret's portfolio had grown to $1.15 million, more than she started with, even after 7 years of consistent withdrawals. How? Because her withdrawal rate was low enough that market returns averaging that same 7% didn't just cover her spending, they exceeded it. Margaret wasn't sacrificing. She was simply spending on things that actually made her life better instead of things that made her life look better. A weekend with her grandkids, a new set of watercolors, a subscription to the local theater, an extra session with her personal trainer, a really good pair of walking shoes that she wore until they fell apart. None of it was visible, none of it was impressive, and none of it required a second purchase to support it. That's the critical difference. Margaret's spending had no tail. Every purchase was self-contained. The watercolors didn't demand a studio renovation. The theater subscription didn't come with a dress code arms race. The walking shoes didn't need a matching lifestyle. Douglas's spending had an enormous tail. Every purchase came with a shadow budget, a second layer of spending that existed solely to justify or maintain the first purchase. And that shadow budget never appeared in any plan he made. Margaret is the one with more money at year 7. Douglas is the one adjusting downward. Here's the paradox most people miss. Margaret spends with more freedom than Douglas ever did because she never feels the pressure of maintaining an image. She never has to calculate whether she can afford the next visible upgrade. Her spending is internally motivated, and internally motivated spending has a natural ceiling. It stops when you're satisfied. Externally motivated spending has no ceiling because the audience always wants more. There's always a nicer car, a bigger trip, a more impressive renovation. The goalpost doesn't just move, it accelerates. And the person chasing it doesn't realize they're running on a treadmill until their legs give out. Douglas is running on that treadmill. Margaret stepped off before it even started. And that one decision made quietly, with no audience, is worth more than any investment strategy, any financial advisor, any market return. Let's step out of the story for a moment and look at the numbers. Because this isn't just a narrative, it's math. There's an exact number where flaunting crosses the line of no return. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, retirees in the top 30% of spenders deplete their portfolios at nearly 3 times the rate of those in the bottom 30%, even when starting balances are similar. The difference isn't income, it's behavior. And according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, nearly 46% of retirees spend more in their first 2 years of retirement than in any subsequent period. That early burst, the one that feels like celebration, is statistically the most dangerous window for long-term portfolio survival. The spending doesn't feel dangerous because the balance is still high. You look at your account and see a big number. You don't see the trajectory. You don't see where that number will be in 10 years if you keep pulling at this rate. The balance is a snapshot. The withdrawal rate is the movie, and most people only watch the snapshot. Now, let's run a scenario. 2 retirees, both start with $1 million, both earn an average annual return of 7%. The only difference is their withdrawal rate. Retiree A withdraws at 3.8%, $38,000 a year, adjusted for inflation. Retiree B withdraws at 6.2%, $62,000 a year, Adjusted for inflation, at year 10, retiree A has approximately $980,000, nearly the full original balance. At year 10, retiree B has approximately $560,000, almost half gone. At year 20, retiree A still has over $800,000. Retiree B is under $140,000 and staring at full depletion within 3 years. That's the power of 2.4%. Not 24%, 2.4. That's the gap between a comfortable 30-year retirement and running out of money at 85. But here's what makes it even worse. There's a concept called sequence of returns risk. It means that when you take large withdrawals, matters almost as much as how much you take. Here's the simple version. Imagine you retire with $1 million. In year 1, the market drops 15%. Your portfolio goes to $850,000. Now you pull out $60,000 to live on. You're down to $790,000. In year 2, the market recovers 15%. Great news, right? Except 15% of $790,000 is only $118,000. You're back to $908,000, not the original million, and you haven't even taken your year 2 withdrawal yet. The math is brutal. A loss followed by an equal gain does not get you back to where you started, and the bigger your withdrawals during the downturn, the deeper the hole. If the market drops 15% in your first 2 years of retirement, which happens more often than people think, and you're pulling out 6% a year on top of that, your portfolio takes a hit it may never recover from. Even if the market bounces back, you've already sold assets at the bottom. Those shares are gone. They can't participate in the recovery. Douglas pulled out 13% in year 1. If the market had dipped even 10% that same year, his long-term trajectory would have been catastrophic. Margaret, withdrawing at 3.6%, could absorb a 10 or even 15% market drop in year 1 and still be fine at year 20. The exact point where flaunting becomes irreversible is when your effective withdrawal rate stays above 5.5% for more than 3 consecutive years. After that, the math turns against you and no market rally can fully undo the damage. That's not an opinion. That's what the data shows. You already know the number, $480,000. You saw Douglas sitting at that kitchen table, staring at a screen that used to say 1.1 million. But what you haven't seen yet is what happened next. Douglas didn't panic. Not right away. He closed the laptop, sat there for a while, and then did something he hadn't done since before he retired. He made a spreadsheet. He listed every recurring expense. The club, the insurance on the SUV, the monthly dining, the gifts to the kids, the vacations, and for the first time, he saw the full picture, not the snapshot, but the movie. Then he made changes. He sold the SUV and bought a used sedan. He dropped the country club membership. He canceled the annual family vacation, the one his kids had started to expect every December. He and his wife had a conversation they'd been avoiding for 2 years, the one about whether they could still afford to help the kids the way they'd been helping them. That conversation was the hardest part. Not because of the money, because of the identity. Douglas had built his retirement around being the generous father, the successful retiree, the man who made it. Pulling back didn't just feel like a budget adjustment. It felt like admitting that the whole performance had been a mistake. His son asked him, "Dad, is everything okay?" Not because he noticed the finances, because he noticed the SUV was gone. That question hit Douglas harder than any bank statement, because it confirmed what he'd been afraid of, that people measured his well-being by what they could see, and now that the visible signals were disappearing, people assumed something was wrong. Nothing was wrong. Something was finally right, but it didn't feel that way. Not yet. But it wasn't a mistake, not in the way he thought. Douglas didn't fail. He followed a script that says retirement is your reward, and rewards should be visible. A script that measures the quality of your retirement by the things other people can see. Nobody handed him that script on paper. It came through commercials, through conversations at barbecues, through the look on his neighbor's face when he pulled up in the new SUV. It came through retirement magazines that showed couples on sailboats, through financial ads that used the word freedom next to images of beach houses, through every well-meaning friend who said, "You only live once." The script was everywhere, and it felt like truth. Because when everyone around you is spending, restraint doesn't feel wise. It feels like you're missing out. It feels like you're doing retirement wrong. And that's the most dangerous part. The script doesn't just encourage spending, it pathologizes saving. It makes the Margarets of the world look like they're not enjoying their lives, like they're afraid, like they didn't really make it. But Margaret isn't afraid. She's free. And there's a difference between those two things that only becomes visible when the money starts running out for everyone else. Margaret, at 76, is still in the same house, still driving the same car. Well, she did replace it at 73 with another modest sedan. Still going to the theater, still painting, still having her grandkids over every other weekend. Her portfolio sits at $1.1 million. She's spent consistently for 8 years, and she's essentially where she started. And here's the part that would surprise Douglas the most. Margaret doesn't feel like she's missing out, not even a little. She doesn't look at other people's vacations and feel envy. She doesn't scroll through photos of country club events and wish she were there. Because the things that make her happy, the painting, the theater, the grandkids, the long walks, they were never in competition with anyone else's lifestyle. They were hers, fully, quietly, completely hers. But here's what matters more than the number. Margaret never had to have that hard conversation. She never had to downsize under pressure. She never felt the ground shifting beneath her. Not because she had more money. She started with less. Because she spent for the right audience, herself. The $500,000 Douglas lost wasn't taken by the market. It wasn't stolen by bad luck. It was handed voluntarily to an audience that never asked for a ticket. There's one question that separates retirees who thrive from those who just survive. And the question is this: am I spending this for me or for someone watching? If you can answer that question honestly, every single time, your money will last longer than you think. Not because you'll spend less, but because you'll spend right. Think about that, man. At the kitchen table, the one looking at his screen, $480,000 left from $1.1 million. The screen shows a number, but the number doesn't tell the story. The story is in every purchase that was made for someone else's approval, every upgrade that was meant to signal success, every dollar that was spent not to live, but to be seen living. Your retirement doesn't need an audience. It needs a plan and the honesty to know the difference between spending for your life and spending for your image. The money you have right now, whether it's $500,000 or $2 million, is not a trophy. It's not a signal. It's not proof that you made it. It's time. It's the number of mornings you get to wake up without worry. The number of afternoons you get to spend doing exactly what you want, not what looks good, but what feels right. Don't spend your time on someone else's approval. You've already earned something better than that. If this made you rethink how you spend in retirement, subscribe, because next week we're going to show you the one habit that quietly separates retirees who thrive from those who just survive.